What is up? Shop Talk. The Shop Talk Podcast. And once again, we are live from the workbench. This is episode number 42. Still playing around with the levels. And I will have a timestamp down in the description below about when I get to the Leo Fender Les Paul stuff and also the Kryie Irving stuff. The man made of glass. So, I want to just say happy birthday to my beautiful wife out there. And she wanted the, let's see if I got this already switched over. She wanted the surf and turf, the jumbo shrimp, and the, she had a T-bone too, so, of course, she didn't eat it all at once, but it's only, well, let's see what time it is, 5:08 a.m., can you believe it? Yeah, I'm a night owl. Oh! Again, I have a couple of, the What's for Dinner cooking videos, from when I first started. They're still up, but they weren't actually cooking videos. More or less, I was, when I first started the podcast, they weren't really videos. They're more or less just me doing a voiceover with a picture, thumbnail, whatever you want to call it. And I never really intended on making cooking videos, but that's how it all started and came about. And that's why, of course, the cooking videos that are actually cooking videos are up on YouTube now. But there are a couple of them that are doing okay or whatever, but they're, again, it's just me doing a voiceover. So I want to redo a couple of those videos soon. Probably the Nathan's and Hormel chili dog and the country style barbecue pork ribs. And then probably over time, I'll probably take them down. Because this could be listened to on YouTube or watched. The cooking videos can be watched on iTunes podcast app. And I should say the Apple podcast app. But onto the Kyrie Irving, I don't know. It hit him freaking out and calling out his teammates, which actually I didn't think that was that uncalled for. But, I mean, I used to be a big Kyrie Irving fan. Even when he went to Boston, I wasn't really upset with him, even being a Cleveland Cavs fan. I'm still a Cleveland Cavs fan. I find myself watching all the Lakers videos. But, yeah, I mean, he's just so far out there. I mean, for one, he's made of glass. For two, you have the flat earth stuff that then later, like a year or two later, he came out and said that it was just a joke. He was just messing with people. Bullshit. And then he also had where he was, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, him talking about, they were about to play at Milwaukee Bucks' old stadium, and they were going to use the old design for the floor. Now, the floor was new. The design was old, and it was by the guy that, it's actually, I don't know if there's a 30 for 30 short on it, or it's a 30 for 30 about the guy that, he did the Love thing. I think that's in Philadelphia. He did some other stuff too. Just amazing artist. And he designed that floor. And then that little documentary is about the guy who ended up buying the floor. So this was an old floor. It wasn't the guy's old floor that he still had. They were just kind of doing like a tribute game there. And he was talking to the press before the game, and well, I know this floor is old, and we'll see how it doesn't have that much bounce, and we'll see how our knees feel on it. Oh my God, I don't know. Maybe he had some bad information. I don't know. But when it comes to this, I see right here, Celtics need a championship or nothing. Mindset of Kyrie Irving. You have all this other stuff. I'd play the clip, but I don't want to get flagged. Let's see here. Celtics time is running out to be contenders. Yeah. Kyrie Irving's criticism of teammates is justified. I have watched that play of Gordon Hayward, and when I first initially seen it, Jason Tatum did get a good shot. I didn't think it was a bad shot. It was a pretty well contested shot, but it almost went in. So if it would have went in, the difference between if it would have went in, is he surprised by the outcome of it? And but if it did go in, if you're going to be a true leader, you would still go to him, maybe not right away, but sometime after the game, and explain why he should have passed it to Horford for the shot. And that's what I think it boils down to. I think he was more pissed about the outcome than anything else, not necessarily the decision-making aspect of it. You know, could win it either way. Oh, Jesus. Let's see here. And also, he was sitting out for today's game. And I don't know if the team suspended him for the comments or if he's... Because I know it was talks. I think, didn't he have a surgery last year? Isn't he? But I heard there was talks about his shoulder, so many games ago. So, I mean, if you don't know who he is, obviously, this doesn't pertain to you. Anyways, but being a big Cleveland Cavs fan, I seen him, going to the Celtics to run his own ship. I get it, but his leadership is just, Jesus, And then the interview, he's freaking out, and he's so fucking pissed. I can only imagine from the time he got from the end of that game where Gordon Hayward threw it in, and he was upset with it then. He had to have been really upset the whole time up until that interview. Because the next day in the morning, he had another little interview real quick. And he's like a completely different person. So, yeah. I don't know. They lack experience. That's what he kept saying. They lack experience. And I get it. Yeah, he's got a championship. But come on. All these other guys are good players, too. I get the whole experience thing. If I can get my goddamn shit right. Well, I figured I was only like 5 beers in, and it's 5 in the morning, so this I thought it would go a little bit better. God damn it. Let's see.
Hey, so what do you want?
What I've always wanted is to watch you die.
And on to the Leo Fender course. If you're on YouTube, you'll see the thumbnail. If you're on Apple Podcast app, you might not see the thumbnail because I'm using a different one. I know. Same old shit. And I'm not necessarily an expert on this matter, and because I've pretty much always been a Fender guy my whole life. At one point, I did have my own website, and I actually quit my job at one point. I had my own website. It was called iwannabuyyourguitar.com, or .net, actually. I know that seems super, super long, but we had a guy in town, and he actually ended up moving to Nashville, but he was buying guitars for like 30 years, maybe longer, in Columbus, Ohio. And his website was called I Buy Guitars. And I think it might have been iBuyGuitars.net. I can't remember. They had Pat Murray. Super, super nice guy. That's beyond the point of this. But I bought a 1973 Gibson Fretless Wonder, it's custom, not a custom shop, but Gibson Les Paul custom. Fretless Wonder is the nickname of those, because they had very little. Well, they had really flat frets. Let's just put it that way. And let's see, about a 1956, and it was one of the very early first wraparound bridge Les Paul Gold Tops off Buddy. That was for a store I work for. Of course, I don't have that much money. And I paid him a little bit too much money for it, but not too much to where we couldn't sell it. Then, let's see. I had an RD. I never mentioned this before. I think it was a 1978 RD Artist custom. And I can't remember if they made 1,300 of those or 1,700 of those. Paid a bit much for it, but really not. I just didn't sell it for as much as what I should have sold it for. At the time, I probably should have sold it for like $2,400. Those guitars are going for a lot of money now. Actually, I should have kept it. I only paid $700 for it at a pawn shop. Sold it for 14. Should have asked for more. You live and you learn. But I should have just kept the goddamn guitar as an investment. I'm trying to think of that. Oh, I almost bought a Gibson Spotlight Special, and this was way before, a couple years before, maybe 3 years before they end up reissuing them. But that actually, when the guitar companies reissue guitars, it tends to drive the price of the older ones down. Except for, I just looked them up today just out of curiosity. I can't remember if they made 300 of them or how many they made of them. I know Santana owns one. Oh, it's too early in the morning. I can't think. Joe Walsh, I think, owns one, or did own one at one point. I'm sure a lot of those guitars were gifted to them from Gibson. I could have bought it. I think it was like $2,800, or maybe it was even $3,000. Anyways, they don't sell for about $6,000 on eBay. I mean, if you can buy something for $3,000 or $2,800 and sell it for $4,000 or $5,000, you do it every day. Really cool guitar. Look those up. And the originals are, I think, a lot better looking than the reissue. Same color and everything. Oh, they did bring out a different color. They made so many of them in there. Anyways, so on the reverb.com, they put out a column, and in quotations it was, when Leo Fender asked Les Paul to endorse the Telecaster. Oh, and this is an excerpt also from Ian S. Port's The Birth of Loud, Leo Fender, Les Paul, and the guitar pioneering rivalry that shaped rock and roll. And it's basically, I mean, come on. Of course, at the time, they would have tried to get Les Paul to endorse the Telecaster, and that's what the whole column is about. And this was in 1951. And real quick, I think there was no really solid body guitar at the time. And you got to think ES also stands for Electric Spanish Guitar in the Gibson frame of things. But Les Paul was at the height of his popularity. So even though he was innovative in modifying his own guitars and, of course, equipment, I mean, he pioneered making a lot of different stuff. One of the first multi-track recorders, phase pedal, one of the first delay pedals, and a bunch of stuff. Again, I'm not necessarily an expert at this, but he was one of the biggest stars playing with Mary Ford. So, of course, not only was he coming up with his own designs and stuff like that, of course again, and we'll get further into it, but it had been, Jesus. There's only so many guitar players that were modifying stuff, more so back then. You had guitars that want to intonate right, especially with the trapeze tailpiece that he came up with for the original Les Paul before the wraparound. It would never quite intonate fully, you know. But again, I've talked about this on my other podcasts. Even if a guitar isn't intonated, if as long as you're not playing chords and you're just doing single run lines, maybe I never actually said this before on here, but I've said it to other guitar players. You can fucking intonate the guitar with your goddamn fingers, whether it's bending or just manipulating the strings. Anyways, so Les Paul was given a Telecaster that had no decal on the headstock, a note from Leo Fender, in quotations, to come join us. But the Fullerton factory at the time was a small shop with mainly Leo at the time and a few others operating it. And again, I think it was called I don't want to fucking say it. I believe it was called the Spanish guitar, they were calling it. And they had all these orders, and I don't think they were shipping out the stuff yet. They were so amazed that this was coming through. As orders were coming through, I'm sorry. So, I read many years ago, Les Paul also had a contract with Gibson that paid Les Paul $50 every time a Les Paul was sold, and that's a lot of quiche. But again, I went back. I can't find, of course, the article that I read, and $50 at the time would be way too freaking much money for each instrument. I'd have to look up further. I know I should do the more research. But yeah, I mean, it's just way too much money. So we'll get further into the contract. I could not find, and if anybody out there that's listening that knows what the original contract was, I know there was some money involved. I know all he had to do was basically take a picture and not be seen playing other instruments at all, other brands at all. So, but I know there was some money involved, and we'll get further into it. So, then in 1967, let's see if I went too far on this. So basically, yeah. In 1967, rising from the ashes, Les Paul signed a new contract where he would receive $5 for every guitar sold. So in 61, the Gibson Les Paul standard changed its shape into what is now known as the SG. They were just all branded Les Paul. Les seen the new design in a local music shop and wanted his name removed from the pointy guitar. Because obviously it has two upper, horns. So, but his contract was not up till 63, but his divorce wouldn't be final until the very beginning of 64, which I actually changed the wording of this. The divorce wasn't finalized, I don't believe, until the end of 64. So rather than sign a new contract and share his earnings with his future ex-wife, he also waited again, he also didn't sign another contract because he was no longer he was at the tail end of his popularity. I want to say the tail end. His popularity decreased. Again, it wasn't the 50s or anything, but it wasn't until I know probably Michael Bloomfield and Keith Richards had a 1966. No, sorry. Keith Richards had a late 50s model Gibson Les Paul, but that was in 66. when he started showing it off and whatnot. So they're, I'm thinking that not only did that guitar, its popularity decline a little bit. For one, they changed the whole fucking design of the thing. So it is what it is. I looked up. Let's see here. And then you got to fast forward years ahead to the most influential guitar player, one of the most influential guitar players, Eddie Van Halen, Ibanez, in the Untold Story book, which shit, those are going for like $75 now. Jesus, sorry about that. I take a little break. You hear in the background some walking around. Yeah, it's only 5:30 in the morning. Actually, let's just 5:39 to be precise. Take a little break. Lost my train of thought. So, yeah, in the Untold Story, let's see here. Oh, that's a little loud. I'll wake up your neighbors.
Who the fuck said that?
In the Untold Story book that was given to me from an Ibanez rep, they state in there when Ibanez was designing their version of the Super Strat, their RG 570, could have been their flagship guitar, and they were trying to figure out a way to get it under Eddie's Christmas tree because they were just getting done with all the final steps of finishing up the design, in hopes to lure him in as an endorsee. So, I mean, again, Eddie Van Halen comes around, and at the time, everyone is buying guitars. I mean, I've talked to guys that were dealers and also, just worked in music stores around that time, and guitars similar to, the Kramer guitar, which was actually, everybody knows what that is. Just old 50s Strat body, or was it 61 Strat body? I can't remember anymore. Anyways, with necks that Kramer gave to him. There was also a bunch of different variations that guitar went through. The striped guitar. So anyways, but Eddie was probably one of the few guitar players since Les Paul to come out and actually modify his guitars. That's why you'll see a lot of guitars that made it through the 80s. And I say made it through because the 80s basically butchered all these vintage instruments from the 60s and 70s. I'm sure even some of the older than that, because the vintage market didn't really pick up until the late 70s. And even then, you got to think, in 1959, so a 1959 Les Paul, $500,000 guitar, $250,000 guitar, depending on where you find one, is, only 20 years old in 1979. I've got a 1969 70 Princeton, Fender Princeton. It's going to be, or it is, 50 years old already. So, before I had all the caps and everything redone in it, and you turn it on, and you could smell it. You know what I mean? It wasn't a bad smell. It was just, you could smell it. It'd get hot as fuck. Yeah. So, anyways, for that $5 deal that he made for each guitar, what did we say? Yeah, 1967. I think just fast forward to a few years down the road, 1972. I believe they did a few $1 million in business then. In 1967, a $5 bill was equivalent to $35.22 in the year 2017. He's making quite a bit of money, because I was trying to figure out how much actual Les Pauls were made, say, in 1972. Because by early 80s, I think 81, their sales had went down by like half. So even if they made $10,000 or 10,000 Les Pauls, which I'm sure they made more around 72, that's quite a bit of money. Of course, I'm sure he had money coming in through other venues. Of course, he still played at, I believe, a couple shows a week. I know he would play in Manhattan. Onto some of the guitars, the Les Pauls I didn't mention, before they came out with pretty much a ES style Les Paul. They had one that was a custom shop one, and then we had that one, and it was signed by Les Paul. And before Les Paul passed away, we sold it online, and for quite a bit of money. It was a nice guitar, super nice guitar. And the guy I worked with, one of them, like an idiot, I told him to not spray lemon oil on any of the guitar bodies. Well, I found out that day when he did that, and he wiped that signature clean off of there. The new owner of the guitar, we informed him of it, and he didn't want that on there anyways. Well, yeah, I know what takes off, certain types of a marker now on guitars. And then we also had a NAMM show. They called it Diseased Maple Top, and it was this green and black guitar. The guy pawned it for $1,100 or $1,000. Maybe it's only $900. Anyways, nothing more about that guy. Fast forward a few years later, he comes back and he buys the guitar for $5,000. $5,000. It was also signed by Les Paul. This guy was getting very high, and he was making pretty good money at the time. He did HVAC, and he had some dough. He did a number of things. He also smoked crack. Anyways, so he was down on his luck, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. Whatever you got to do. Sometimes when people are pawning stuff, they just got to have some money. I get it. I've also seen, I don't remember if it was an 86 or 88, Ferrari Red, Gibson Les Paul, custom. A few others. There's a couple that, one guy I know bought a couple of those, still has them. He's, of course, got a Black Beauty from the 80s that he also bought there. And then we have, of course, motivational speaker. He would fucking pawn one of his late 70s Gibson Les Paul customs there. So I've seen them, over and over again. It's not that I'm not that much of an expert on the whole story behind it. I would like to dig further into this to come up with a number of all the guitars that were sold in a certain era. Try to figure out a reasonable number of what Les Paul actually made off of the total sales, even if it's just a round number or even rounded down number, just out of curiosity, so I appreciate everybody out there that watches and listens. Of course, I've got tomorrow, we're going to do another cooking video, hopefully edit it, do the voiceover, put it out tomorrow. I might actually do 2 videos tomorrow. One actually filmed with a decent camera. See if we can go back to this.
Please like and subscribe and share so I can think my dad is cool.
Yeah. And check us out on Apple podcast app, YouTube, and PayPal me, paypal.me/whatever. I'm saying that all fucking wrong. Live from the workbench. Yeah, check us out there. And I hope you guys have a good week. I'm going to look more into this shit. Maybe we'll get to some more pawn shop history next week. And who knows, I might have another podcast that comes out this week. I got to start cranking them out. Been doing this since March 18th or 17th or something to that extent of last year. This is Shop Talk Podcast, live from the workbench, episode 42.
What?
Yeah.
Where's my cat?
I killed your cat, you druggy bitch.
Don't pawn your Gibson Les Paul
Why?
Customs
I felt it would bring closure to our relationship.
or
Killed
standards.
my.
You're what? You're huh? You're what, bitch? Damn it. I'll shoot myself in the head. You can tell me that cat's name. Go ahead. You're what? You're precious little.
Give me.
Oh, Jesus! What color was it, bitch?
Also, if you're into Ibanez guitars, check out Mace Bailey and what he looks like now and what he used to look like when he was a designer for Ibanez. He designed that heart-shaped multi-neck guitar for Steve Vai. Many other guitars, very well. He's a great designer. You guys take care. Have a good week. I'll see you next week.
Can it be that it was all so simple then?
Got me thinking, I remember the time.
Can it be that it was all so simple then?
Ain't no changing what's left.
Can it be that it was all so simple then?
Because we all race against death.
Can